Hello and welcome to today's A-Team webinar on best practice for buy-side data management across structured and unstructured data. My name's Sarah Underwood. I'm a contributing editor here at A-Team Group, and I'll be moderating the webinar. Before we get started, I'd just like to share some events and things we have coming up. You can see them at the bottom of your page, and if you'd like to take part, you can sign up too. On the 21st of November, you can join us at our RegTech Summit in New York City. That's next week. You can also download the 12th edition of our Regulatory Data Handbook. It is just that, a handbook, not a reading book really, but very helpful all the same. And looking into 2025, you can sign up for A-Team Group's 20th of March 2025 Data Management Summit in London. Okay, let's get back to the webinar. Our expert speakers today are Christina Schack, Head of Data Operations and Strategy at Montebell Asset Management, Gurpreet Singh, Global Head of Data and Analytics at Partners Capital, John Joseph, Head of Sales Engineering at Acceptor, and Sam Barber, Head of Sam. Let's start that bit again. Sam Barber, Head of Data Services Product Development at Rhymes. Okay. I'll ask them all to introduce themselves better than I did, but just first a few options for you. We'll be running Slido today, and to the right of your screen you'll see two panels. One is for polls. We'll be running 3 polls today. I'll let you know when they're coming up, and do please take part in the polls so we can gauge your interest and your in the topic we're talking about today. And also there's a panel for your questions. Please put your questions in whenever you like. We'll take a break at some point to answer your questions and not leave them to the end, so that we do have time to take some of those on, and I'll put those to our speakers when the time comes. So let's get over to our main speakers. And Christina, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your interest here.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Christina Schack. I'm heading the data platform team at Bank Vontobel. So we are a central unit providing all kinds of data services for the whole company with multiple teams, with data engineering teams, data management teams, and so forth. I'm in the finance industry and with data since over 18 years now in various roles, also working for other asset managers in Switzerland and Germany. And my focus is always on data in various roles, data management on the one hand side, but also architecture, data integration, and so forth. Yeah, and I'm looking forward to this webinar.
Good. Over to you, Gurpreet, please.
All right. Thank you, Sarah. My name is Gurpreet Singh. I'm, as Sarah mentioned, Head of Data and Analytics at Partners Capital. A bit about Partner Capital. We are an outsourced investment office, and we work with high net worth individuals, charities, endowments, and we manage their portfolio of investment. My role covers all aspects of data, governance, quality, analytics, AI, machine learning. And my background is I started working as a strategy consultant from a number of years before I joined the industry, always focused on financial services, started working in IT, and then moved to data around 10 years ago.
Okay, thank you. And over to you, John.
Thank you, Sarah. My name is John Joseph, the head of sales engineering for Acceptor. Acceptor is the leading data automation company enabling business users and technology users across the financial services industry to really automate their processes. And on top of the platform that we provide, we also have products for reconciliations, tax, and on the post-trade processing side for confirmations as well. A little background. So I went right from college into the financial services industry, especially fintech, working for an order management system company and implementing hedge funds and asset managers initially, and then moved to Acceptor about 5 years ago and really opened my eyes to middle and back office operations. So been with Acceptor for a little over 5 years now. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. And coming to you, Sam.
Thanks, Sarah. So I'm head of enterprise data management at Rhymes. And we provide enterprise data management. That's what we do. So data management across benchmarks, ETF, but also data mastering across all the different domains like security, price, entity, and ESG. And really my responsibility is, hey, we need to make sure our clients maximize the value that they get from the data that they license. And I really like what Christina said. She works in a central unit for Vontobel, and on our side, we work as a central unit for the industry, trying to make sure we add as much efficiency as possible.
Okay, thank you very much. All a great mix of experience and expertise in the room, so this should be a very good conversation. And let's start it though with a poll question for our audience. The poll asks, how satisfied is it structured and unstructured data management? So whilst you answer that, let me come to one of our experts to talk about how they see the organization and management of structured and unstructured data across the buy side. And Sam, would you like to kick off here? What do you say? What do you see?
Sure, this is my opportunity to sway people voting, I guess. So fundamentally, buy-side firms are managing billions of items a day, and firms are just struggling to grasp as much data as possible on their side. And I think a lot of the response that we've seen is that people focus on the accessibility to the data, and they don't always consider that they have to maintain those interfaces with third parties, and they don't always think about how do we reconcile the data back. So often the data becomes a bit of a spider web across the business, and we see data islands being built for different domains. And from our standpoint, we're really focused on how can we work with our clients, with our partners, to untangle that spider web and make sure there's a clean path of data going through to clients. Because people are worried about governance, they're worried about data quality, but fundamentally, we just need to help them maximize the value of their data. So I think that's the state as we are now. I think there is a big industry push to modernize the data storage and improve the data governance, but we're in the middle of that right now.
Okay, and Gurpreet, what do you see out there in the market when you're out talking to people?
I think I'll just focus on my experience with Partners Capital, and I think based upon that, the discussions we had. This is my first gig on the buy side. I've always worked with large banks on the sell side before this. And I think one thing, when I came over here, I found unique situations. One was, which was expected, I was the first data hired by the company, so maturity was quite low. But that was expected. So we put in frameworks for data governance, data quality, people taking accountability. We established our data warehouse and the overall stack for data analytics, push people to self-service analytics. So doing a lot of work and making progress on that. I think one thing that we found initially quite challenging was the manual processes. And it's not just the internal processes that probably you can have a better handle on, but we work with a number of funds that we invest in. So it could be multi-asset class, from private equity to public markets to credit markets. And the interaction with those funds and the information we receive from them is all unstructured. So that's giving an example. I think we have a good handle on this one now, but our valuations are NAV for our clients on a monthly basis. We still get it in an unstructured format. And then we put AI on top of it to automate that process. But I think that brings me to next point is what I've realized in this industry is lack of standardization is a huge problem. So there's clients and the funds that we invest in. Every fund will have multiple investors, and they would send the same unstructured data to those investors, and those investors are probably putting some kind of AI on top of it to translate back into some kind of structured data. And then I say it's not. When you look at it, it's not a problem that you need to solve with AI. It's a problem that you should solve with standardization. And I see that that's a huge problem on the buy side, in my view.
Okay, fine. Well, we'll address some of those issues as we go along. Could we perhaps see the poll results, please? Thank you. Sam, would you like to comment on this? Is this what you might expect? A bit middle ground there. What do you think?
Well, I managed to unmute myself. Yeah. I think I would say that this is aligned with what I'd expect. Yes. I think the just about satisfied is where people mostly fall in. But that's going to very quickly become not satisfied over the next 1 to 2 years. I think that's more of a recognition that people are in the middle of moving to the next phase, and they know that everyone else is in the middle of that phase as well. So they're comfortable with where they are, but they don't want to get left behind either.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Let's see what we can resolve for these people as we go along. But let's run another poll question now. This one asks, what are the challenges of structured and unstructured data at your organization? This time, please feel free to tick as many of the boxes as are appropriate to your organization. And while you do that, let me please bring in Christina to see how she sees the challenges presented by structured and unstructured data.
Yes, I think some of the points were already mentioned by Sam and Gurpreet. I think it's really the huge volume of data and the different data sources and the lack of standardization and harmonization, which gives some extra challenges. And what I also see is that in the usage of data has changed, and of course data quality becomes more relevant in future. So let's, for example, take ESG data and the usage for it. So in general, it's not just purely the investment process or the trading where you need certain type of data, market data, but also then for sustainability reporting, for insight generation, and so forth. And that brings new use cases up that they have come up with extra challenges. They need to harmonize more data. Data analytics as such is a topic where you try to get so much different data together in one central place that you can really see correlations, finding out patterns and all of that. And therefore, the harmonization of data becomes very, very challenging because due to lack of standardization, lack of clear identifiers, this is a huge work which all the operational teams then have to do. And what I see very often, everyone tries to solve the problem individually for his analytic use case. And me and my team, for example, we try now to bring this together on one platform, helping them with the harmonization of the different data types, different data sources that come in and do that. And there are, of course, not just the question of the identifiers and the harmonized valuation of data, but it also comes with the timing, how accurate the data are, when do you get updates, do you get informed about updates, and all of that. So there are multiple levels of harmonization and bringing data together, which is quite a challenge. And then there's also the cost aspect, one in the pure storage of data and management, but also many data come with some price costs. So you want to use them efficiently and also in a very good way so that you really can see where is the data used and manage also the usage of data quite well and efficient. And I think the other aspect that I would like to mention is the unstructured data. Now with Gen AI or AI in general, we try to harvest more and more data also from unstructured data. I think things like fact sheets, term sheets, reports, and all of that, financial statements that we get. We also try to get extra information that we don't get over the traditional channels, but also try for our research teams in a special to get this out. And of course, the extraction works quite well, but also needs some governance, some monitoring that the unstructured data is extracted in a good way and is reliable. And yeah, I think I would say these are the challenges that I would see.
Okay, thank you, Christina. John, what would you like to add there?
I mean, Christina was so eloquent in her description, but I'll try to add a little bit of my perspectives. You know, it usually is an accuracy versus efficiency conversation, but I would argue that it's both, especially today in 2024. Like, how do you process large amounts of unstructured data accurately without slowing things down or incurring additional costs? And when we talk about additional costs, we're talking about people or systems. There is an incredible pressure to reduce costs, and I think Gurpreet and Christina can also vouch for that. There is a cross pressure, right, to reduce costs, also to reduce people, reduce systems, and have sort of platform consolidation too. But the thing is, whether it's structured or unstructured, consistency of data that both of you mentioned, across multiple systems, across assets and products, is really difficult to achieve, even today. And finally, I think it's the reality of the unstructured data growth rate. You know, there's a stat that I always use that unstructured data will account for 80, like unstructured data will account for 80% of the data collected by 2025, and that's an IDC stat, right? And then further alarming is that 43% of IT decision makers fear their infrastructure won't handle the demand, and that's a quote from Dell, right? So there is the unstructured sort of cloud is certainly above the data management world.
Okay, fine. Great. Can we see the results and see how our audience is doing here? Okay, now something we didn't particularly mention, data silos. John, what would your comments be on those poll results? And volume comes in second.
Yeah, I mean, those are recipes for disparate processes and disparate systems, right? Or part of the, this poll responses indicates that there are disparate processes and disparate systems, right? The volume of data is not going to decrease. It's only going to increase as we get into more asset classes and products. And of course, back in the day, 100 positions in a long-short equity fund, that could be 200 positions now today, right? So the volume of data is increasing. So it actually, the responses are in line with what I would expect.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, John. And coming back to Gurpreet, if I may. Gurpreet, how can buy-side firms set strategy to address these challenges and improve data management, and obviously the things that go with that, like business insight, decision-making, and other valuable things they can add to that data?
Yeah, I think let's focus on the theme of unstructured data. I absolutely agree with John. Rather than a challenge, I think it's an opportunity for us. And I'll give you a background. So we used to get, we've been getting unstructured data. Christina mentioned term sheets, a product. We do get manager quarterly letters that have huge amount of information in there in terms of how the fund is performing, what's the attribution, what's the expectations, etc. And we have like 20 years worth of that data, but only I would say 5% of that data was used earlier in any kind of to generate any insights because we didn't have capability or resources to convert that into structured format so we can generate some insights on that. I think with Gen AI, we're looking at it as a huge opportunity to capture more and more of data from these documents and from unstructured data and make it available for any insights we want to generate from that. I mean, challenge I have seen, and I'm still hopeful that the few of the platforms from generative AI, we looked at it, we have a huge problem in accuracy. They are 60-50%, depending upon who you're talking to, accurate, but there's a huge gaps on the other side, which makes them unuseful at the moment. But as I said, technology is evolving. We're keeping a close eye on it. And we are hoping that we'll get to an accuracy level of 80% or so. And then we put governance, as Christina mentioned, around it. So someone is checking, make sure it is accurate. And then we'll have a huge amount of information that we can utilize. That's what we're trying to do.
Okay, big task. Christina, from a practitioner's view, how do you sort of set strategy here? Obviously, you have a team, you've got to get everybody in the same direction and everything. How would you think to address some of those challenges with a strategy that's going to work for you?
Yes, I think I also see the points that Gurpreet mentioned, so I want to add some additional points there. I think, first of all, really having a strategy and doing an assessment of where you stand is very important for the next steps, and also to see where you go to. I feel it's very often we just go on the problems and try to solve them individually. But I think if we look at the things a little bit holistic to see how that works end to end and where we want to go to, especially if we now have this changing world where analytics play more and more a role, where unstructured data become more and more useful also for the processes that we have. I think it's really time to think, where do you want to go to and what would be needed to get there. I feel that's very important to also align it with all the stakeholders. Very often what I see is that if you speak with the business, they have already some ideas, but they only come to IT or data teams just when it's getting urgent. And then, of course, you don't have so much flexibility to solve problems. So it would be better to have a common understanding where, as a company, you want to go to with the data and how much data-driven, for example, you want to have, and what are the key spots that you would like to focus on. I think many companies do already, especially many companies start off how they want to use AI. And I think that comes then also with the question how you want to use the data and which data do you want to use for that. The other thing is then also on the data management side, understanding that you can't solve it just by another tool or application. What Sam says, it's looking into this holistic and say, how do you want to manage the data and things like that? So who are the people who manages the data? Is this something that you want to outsource? What would you insource? Do you have central teams, decentral teams? All of this I feel is quite important. At Vontobel, we have decided to have a decentralized approach, and we're looking really individually at the data and feel what makes sense for us to manage internally and what we give to solution partners, but also we have different teams across the company who are really experts on the different areas. But then, and that comes then with that, we heard it now multiple times, comes with a central data governance. So a framework that allows this decentralized management and decentralized usage of data, but having common policies, common principles, common processes, so that you still get the consistency in the data and also getting the value out of it.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Christina. And taking us to another practical step forward, what are the priorities when you're resolving structured data problems? I suspect that the next question asks, well, it does ask, what are the problems when addressing the challenges of unstructured data? So these two might go together, but let's start with structured data from you, if you can separate out. If not, tell us about all of it.
Yes, so I think with structured data, what I also mentioned before, I feel definitely it's very important to look where you want to get to, and for us, one at Vontobel, one of the important points where finding out the responsibilities and the expertise of data, so sorting this out. One concrete example, we have a special ESG team which looks after ESG data, and we really the central point for the company, but they are just looking at ESG data, but for other credit data or other market data or other data, there are other teams. So really figuring out what makes sense. I think it's very important that the expertise is, or the management of data is there where the expertise should be. So I think that was something that we have figured out. And then within these teams, we try to figure out how they can manage the data best and bringing this into a broader concept of data management. So I think we, for example, have implemented a data mesh setup where we really talk about data domains and the ownership of domains with an exchange of how data can be can then be handled and transferred. So for me, it's really what I mentioned before. One is really having the strategy and a clear direction where you want to go to, then sorting out the responsibilities and see how this can be managed, and then finding the right setup. For us, it was data mesh, but also a setup which fits to your company size and the strategic goals that you want to have.
Thank you very much indeed. And John, coming to you, would you like to add that in terms of the practicalities of getting you to grips with your structured data, but also perhaps touch on unstructured data separately? That'd be great.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we spoke about data strategy, but a data strategy without data standardization is probably not a strategy, a good strategy at least, because data standardization allows for something that's like a repeatable approach when solving issues. And when you get to that point, things like automating data validation and remediation is the next logical step. So standardization is really important to addressing structured and unstructured problem, because the reality is when you're looking at unstructured data, The goal of extracting unstructured data is to get it structured, but you still have a data standardization problem, right? So whether it's a structured data or unstructured data, you still have data standardization issues. So that's, for me, is a common denominator in approaching it with a good data strategy.
Okay, fine. And good. On unstructured data, you talked about volume, etc., and challenges and what you're trying to do. What are the priorities here?
I think, as I mentioned, the one of the biggest priorities is getting to an accuracy level that we want to get to make it useful. And then I think another challenge is that we want to make sure that the governance we put around it, which is essential, but we're not keep making it inefficient. So as we discussed earlier in the call, cost pressure is always there. We have to find a balance between um, how extensive governance we put in place to make it accurate enough, but is not inefficient. That's what we are focusing on. Um, from unstructured data perspective, I think we are in early stages, but what we tried, the Christina mentioned earlier, what we are trying is to consolidate large number of use cases that business wants to execute and see what are the common themes, what are the common platforms or the or underlying structure that we can put in place so that we can enable multiple use cases. And that's what we are exploring at the moment.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. And moving on again and bringing Sam back in. Sam, tell us something about how you would delineate and explain how modern data management platforms can help here and what they can deliver. Obviously, they need to address some of those challenges that our audience and other speakers have noted. What do these systems look like, and have they changed over the last 10 years, perhaps?
Yeah, I think Gurpreet has helped lead in with the multiple use cases, and a lot of the conversation we've had so far leads us in very nicely. I think if you think about what legacy data management platforms were designed for, and if we take legacy to be around 10 years ago or more, one, they weren't really built to commingle unstructured data and structured data. So there were platforms built to handle unstructured data, but they were not the same platforms that handled structured data. And also, if you think about the actual function, they were primarily built as the support mechanisms for the operations process. Whereas if you look at the demands now on a modern data management platform, okay, you need to be able to handle that unstructured data alongside structured data. So for instance, the Rhymes Lakehouse on our side has data in a relational database, but you can also access Neo4j through the same interface, which is very useful for ESG, for instance, which is something that we've already mentioned. But also because we're going beyond just the operations business to look at, how we can facilitate revenue generation across the front office, how we can have cost savings for client reporting and compliance and so on. We just see that there's just an increased demand for modern data platforms to take on more and more of the client's processes. And where they can really help is through greater automation, through greater economies of scale. We're seeing more and more what I would call operational flexibility or operational elasticity, which is adding a human in the loop and having a human in the loop when you need them, but not having them around the rest of the time, which is extremely valuable. And when I think about what a good modern data management platform should do, it should basically remove onerous tasks from your business users and let them focus on what they're paid to do and what they want to do.
Okay. John, what's your interpretation there of the modern data architectures for data management?
Yeah, I mean, we interface with enterprise data management systems, right? But so the key thing is automate the data quality into data management, right? So for us, it's about data cleansing, it's about enrichment, like filling in what's missing, right? A lot of times the data is incomplete, so we want to get it complete and trusted before pushing it into data management. And then if you can wrap human in the loop that Sam had mentioned, that's validation right there. So run validation, have human in the loop, semi-autonomous, right? But you want to deal with the 2% of the issues that requires a human intervention, fix it, and then get the process moving. So that's really important. Real-time integration has been an important thing, especially in the past 5 years, right? Connectivity, interoperability. a data management solution without sort of connectors, right? And the ability to connect into multiple third-party applications is also a critical thing that we see with modern day data management. And then we spoke about built-in governance and compliance controls. One of the things, if I could overlay the AI piece, Gurpreet said that 50-60% on sort of the OpenAI sort of LLM world, right, in terms of accuracy. And this was very similar, like 5 years ago with IDP, intelligent document processing. It takes time to get to that accuracy level. So how do you still get efficiency? Well, you have to wrap the validation. You have to wrap human in the loop. You have to put those controls and governance in place in order to remediate, rebuild the model, right? Update the model, and then remediate the model with remediated data, right? So that's really important when we're talking about modern day data management.
Okay, thank you very much. And staying with you, John, what guidance would you give to people who are, transitioning to these kinds of platforms? We saw earlier in the poll that data silos is still a problem. Huge volumes of data is still a problem. It's not just a sort of one size fits all. What's the guidance? Where do you start? What should people be doing?
I think the biggest piece of advice is it's not a magic box. And if you don't treat it as though there's the silver bullet solution, you got to start small to prove value and then iterate quickly before scaling up the solution, number one. Number two, invest in training your people. The lack of an understanding of data in general by the employees is certainly a misstep. And the second piece of advice is to be intentional, meaning that you got to build for scale from the outset, right? So that should be part of your data management strategy. Focus on what you're trying to achieve rather than the technology and how it's implemented. So don't worry about filling in every box of every feature in the solution. Define the problem statement and address the problem with the solution instead of trying to make sure that you're getting every feature taken care of with the solution.
Okay, Sam, what would your guidance be there?
Well, first of all, JJ managed to look inside my head with his answers. So I may be slightly repetitive, but I'll try and not be. I really liked what he said around, encouraging data management principles across the business. I think sometimes people get lost in the fact that they think data management is technology and technology is data management. And you need to think of them as separate things, and you need both to be successful. And I think that's really important. And to go to what John said about, don't focus on every single checkbox. I would summarize that as just encourage abstract thinking. So think about what are the core business functions you need to support and how you'll do that. But you shouldn't think about every single intricacy. You shouldn't go too into detail because you just get caught in analysis paralysis, and we see that quite a lot. And the other thing I would say is focus on where your moat is. So if you have partners who can specialize and help in a certain area, that's valuable. That's better than you necessarily building something yourself. And similarly, if you think you can add value in a certain area, make sure you build out and invest in that particular area.
Okay, that's great. Thank you both. Let's take a break for some audience questions. We have quite a few here. Some we've touched on, but obviously we can give more information. And I'm going to come to you, Christine, with the first one. It asks, is there an outsourced data management option here? And you mentioned that. Just tell us a little bit more about how you would work out that option and to what extent and how that would work.
Yes, I think there are several options. And again, as I mentioned at the beginning, there is not one solution that fits for all. At Bank Vontobel, we have, for example, outsourced some of our trading, consolidation and back office topics. And then, of course, if you have this business process also outsourced, you could also think of putting some of the data management capabilities which is needed for settlement, for custody service or something like that. The same applies, for example, for fund management services. If you have certain aspects there which you have outsourced, you can leverage and scale. The other option, of course, is always that if you already buy data in, so I think we have here Rhymes also, and I think Sam could elaborate on that. There are always multiple service levels that you could foresee when you get data. Many of the service providers offer not just purely the delivery of data, but also some enhanced data management capabilities. So, and I think there are multiple steps of doing it. You can insource everything. You can also say, no, I just use the tool capabilities there, or you can really have a full-fledged managed service. And I think that goes a little bit in the same direction, like mentioned before, starting at some point and figuring out what would be the right level for you.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to add to that, Sam, on the outsource element?
Yeah, I think the outsourced element is vital. And I mentioned earlier the operational elasticity and having support for where you have your most critical periods where you have, for instance, a rebalance and you need to manage a lot of data around there. You don't want to have the same team operating year round at that level. So I think that piece is really important. And I think, again, it just goes to, you need to be able to support all levels of support. So the top level, the gold standard of white glove support may not necessarily be the right thing for your business. You may have a volume challenge that you want to address through a lower level of support, and that's okay. But you just, again, need to identify the core business functions to support and make sure you support them.
Okay, fine. Gurpreet, coming to you, I'm going to ask you two questions at once, so listen up carefully. The
Sure.
first one says, how can buy-side practitioners win budget to improve data management and incorporate unstructured data? And the other question, which is similar-ish, says, how can we demonstrate the ROI of integrating unstructured data, which will be a cost in its own right? So we're going from how do we get the budget to do it, then how do we show the ROI so that we can continue doing it?
Okay, so I think I can spend a bit more time on that one. I've been through that challenge. I joined Partners Capital around 3 years ago. My first step was to establish data strategy, and the first question was asked why. And so we have to put together a convincing business case. The way we do it is we convince the business that there are a few things that are foundation. We definitely should do that. Every other business is doing. We spoke to other peers in our industry, and um, that's everyone is looking at. And the foundation things are we should to have your data stack. You should have your data warehouse where everything is available. You need to have proper controls around data quality. These are the foundation thing. There's no point spending a huge amount of time trying to find out where that particular thing will save some amount of effort and efficiency in the business, because conceptually that makes sense. So that was hard part. We managed to convince the business that these are the foundation things. On top of that, then there are discretionary spend, and that's where we define a proper business case. We identify how much it will save in terms of efficiency, how much it will improve our alpha, what could be the impact on employee morale, a number of aspects. Some of them are quantifiable, others are not. And we build an IRR model. We are an investment firm. The partners are, everyone is IRR driven. So we need to show the return on investment to spend on those initiatives. And typically what we do is data governance. The foundation of data architecture is all foundation. Anything we need to do around data analytics, on AI, etc., is discretionary, and we build proper business case around it. Now, the business case for unstructured data, we haven't had the challenge yet, but we will get to that. And the reason we haven't had the challenge yet, I'll give you a bit of background. When I came in and I tried to convince that we need to spend more on AI, need to think about how we can use AI to transform our business case, that was in 2020, 2021. And I had some small success. Given when LLM models and ChatGPT launched, it went other way around, where partners are asking me, how can we use generative AI? And we need to get ahead of it, because otherwise our competitors might eat our lunch. And now I'm on a different side. I have to calm down their enthusiasm, because we are looking into the market. It's evolving, but still it needs to evolve a little bit more to get there. So it's not something we need to define as now, but again, you have to think about what's the business case, what's the business use case. So you're not really deploying Gen AI or any LLM model just for the sake of it, even though you get some experimentation done. But what business problem you're trying to solve, and what will be the impact of it? And then I think that's what you have to define. The other aspect is that, which I try to explain to business over here, and I mentioned that before about unstructured data. We have a huge amount of information in that, and we might not know the use case for all of those information. But conceptually, we know that if we have all of this information that stays there in our SharePoint, in our folders from last 20 years, has very valuable information. And if we can find what those attributes that could be valuable, convert that into structured data and have that foundation ready so we can just deploy those use cases to generate better insight, to look at patterns, to look at historical attribution and see how we can make that to help our investment decision making better.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And John, coming to you, I really have two questions for you at once as well here. So the first one, and I think there is no answer, or we could be here all day, it asks, how do you solve the problem of data standardization? This is a question that we often talk about in data management, but how do you solve it? And the other one is a question that's come in just now. It says, have you considered using knowledge graph for data standardization?
Yeah, I mean, data standardization, I think the way I'll describe the way that we handle data standardization, especially Acceptor. Number one is the ability to take in any format across any channel, right? A data standardization has to deal with multiple formats. But then also part of it is not just an ingestion problem. Okay? So you can ingest as all types of data, but not be able to do anything with the data. But you have to extend past that. Then you have to be able to overlay other structured data bits, which could be reference data, right? So a lot of standardization and normalization is the overlay of reference data. The more reference data you can put into a process to enrich a data item or any data structure, data set, is going to help you in the long run, right? Because we may not be at the level where we can have a large language model go into sort of a custom data set and generate insights that also generate alpha, right? We may not be at that point, but you also want to get yourself to that point. You want to get yourself to have a really good, clean, structured data set, right, in a database, so that when we're at that point of overlaying it with all of these intelligent AI models, then I think you'll achieve the alpha or the ROI that we're all expecting at some point in time.
Okay, thank you, Sam. You wanted to add a comment on knowledge graph technology.
Yeah, just because I'm quite excited by the technology. We're using it on our side to produce our digital twin. So if you think of what we're doing on our side, we're collecting data from over 800 different vendors, and then we're distributing it out. We're doing validations, calculations, mastering, and so on. It's quite a complex chain of events, but ultimately it operates a little bit like a factory. And if you went inside an Amazon warehouse and you looked at what they were doing, you'd be very impressed with how efficient it all is. So we realized the need to use a knowledge graph to map out that ontology, so that we could basically follow each of the processes and also show that to our clients. So I think there's a lot of value in adding a knowledge graph to have standardization. It's a different type of standardization, but I think it's where the industry will probably ultimately move to.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And Sam, a final question for you. And I think great to put this on to a vendor. It says the ability to scale seems important. How can we ensure we will be able to scale data management and ops as data volumes continue to grow? Obviously, we've talked about volumes growing already, and it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. How can people ensure they're going to be able to scale?
Yeah, I think it probably goes back again to the abstract thinking. So you don't want to pigeonhole yourself with your requirements, and tie yourself to processes that don't scale. So you need to think about what problems do I need to solve? How could these problems change over time? and who can I work with to make sure that as we increase scale and as new demands come in, the design of the high level architecture I put in place will support that. So I think it's a difficult question to answer there more specifically than that, because we don't have a crystal ball. But I think it's about remaining flexible in your thinking. And also, again, if I go back to the operational elasticity, if you have people on hand to be able to help out when there is a demand, then that's obviously helpful.
Okay, thank you. That's all the time I think we have for our audience questions. So thank you to the audience for your questions, and thank you indeed to our speakers for taking them on and answering them all. So it's back to my questions, and coming back to Christina first. This is again something we've talked quite a bit about, but let's pin it down. What is the role of AI and Gen I here in improving buy-side data management?
Yeah, I see 3 points, and I think we touched them all a little bit already. I think the first, most obvious one is really the conversion of unstructured data to structured one. So really the combination of structured and unstructured data, and get therefore more out of the value. And I think Gurpreet mentioned that we always have this old unstructured data that we now can harvest and that we now can use, but I still see a lot of manual processes where people have to manually really type information from documents into databases, or the recordings of conversations or things like that, which now really definitely helps in data management, getting more values, filling the gaps that you have in your database with the unstructured data. So I think this is one of the first points that I see. The other one, of course, is using AI. So for data quality aspects and data oversight aspects, I think what is data quality? This is a defined set of rules that you run across your data to make sure that it meets certain criteria. And if you can leverage AI, you are much more flexible in doing this, in really checking the consistency of the data with these rules that you are applying. Here, maybe not just Gen AI, but the broader scale of AI function will definitely help. And the third aspect that I will mention is maybe not so much the technical one. It's really more about the interest for data. And I think it's, of course, there is currently a hype generated by the Gen AI piece, but now people are interested, want to use data, getting more out of data. So you can use the buy-in and getting people involved in the data management, in providing data, talking about data quality aspects. And that's also very good that we can bring this in. So maybe this is the third one is not really real technical, but what I see, if people are now interested, it's much more getting their buy-in for working on data management and on data quality.
Okay, thank you. Sam, what would you add here?
Yeah, and I'm excited to answer this one, because actually we had our internal AI hackathon last week, and I was one of the judges, so I saw all of the different entrants. And there was some that kind of really stood out in terms of some value that we see. So one of them was where we're getting over 6,000 emails coming in to inform us about data partner transitions, changes, and we can use AI as an assistant to automate that process, load the data again into our digital twin, into our ontology, and use that as an informant, basically, of anything that's coming up. As an overseer, not to replace the extra process, I want to add, because I think that would be a scary proposition. And then another one we actually was just an assistant to speed up checking data quality. Where there is a known issue, I want to quickly pull out the stats and investigate a certain process in a very complex chain of events. And that one was the eventual winner, actually, because the team, and it was a relatively non-technical team based out of Manila, they deployed the co-pilot that they built themselves to solve the issues before the hackathon was even finished. They had 2 days. So there is a lot of places where it's adding value. I think the genie is a little bit out of the bottle, so we have to be careful. And I would urge people to remember, what you're really doing is you're giving a competent person who's read all the documentation access to the keyboard. But you're not giving someone who works at the company, has been there for 15 years and really understands everything, the hands on the keyboard. The Copilot needs training. So I'd remind people of that, but it's as an additives tool, it's extremely exciting.
Thank you very much indeed. And John, what's your perspective here?
No, I mean, I love the positivity and the enthusiasm with Gen AI. I think people see the productivity that they have in their personal lives with Gen AI, right? I think they're trying to see how that would impact in the workplace. So I think when we talk about how is it progressing, I think it will progress because of the enthusiasm, right? I don't think there's no choice but to progress because people see the application not only in their work life but also in their personal life. So I think the progress in their personal life will translate to the progress in their work life. But I think there's still things that that need to happen in order for it to be approved across all of the clients, right? Some clients or some firms don't even allow ChatGPT as an example, right? Only allow Copilots. So we know that some firms are still not at the point of adopting it all, right? But I think they will with the proper guidelines and audit controls. So I'm encouraged by it. We have invested into sort of the integration of IDP and OpenAI and how that could enrich the data automation process. We always believed that it was never an AI problem. It's a data problem, right? So because of that, we've approached our product management philosophy to build integrations into all of these AI providers because we believe it's a fantastic orchestrator and enabler of AI, but also overlay it with all of the operational controls that you need to have in place.
Okay, thank you all on that. So I'm sure it's something we're going to come back to. Yes, so we're relatively early days, lots of interest, some small projects, some POCs and so on. So hopefully we'll come back and talk about that sometime in the next few months. Meantime, let's run a final audience poll, and this one asks what kind of benefits companies are getting. And again, you can tick as many of the boxes that are relevant to your organization. And while you do that, let me come to Gurpreet to talk about the benefits of getting data management right in the buy side and the penalties of getting it wrong.
Sure. So I think, as you would expect, right, there are two aspects of it. We focus a lot on operational efficiency because that's where we had problems. If you go 2 years back in the time, we had huge problem around manual data and data quality arising due to manual processes. And the teams would check every quarter. We would spend like 2 weeks, most of the people will just be checking data to make sure that whatever we send out to our clients is accurate. And that has hugely changed, but there's a huge efficiency gain because of that direct impact, improved data quality, less amount of checking, and less amount of time spent on these processes. So I think that's one aspect of it from efficiency side. On the other aspect, improved alpha, there are different levers that people have used in our industry, improved alpha, for example, increased revenue, etc., etc. But I take a simpler approach of it, and wise talk to a business, and we generally say, and I'm overly simplifying it, but we make decisions. And if you look at our research team, they make decisions whether we should invest in a fund. Is that the team good enough? Do we expect them to generate alpha for our clients? So huge decisions around that. And our client investment team, they make decisions how they manage their client's portfolio, to which funds they should invest in, and when they need to balance it. All of that is making decisions day in and day out. And if we can improve the accuracy of those decisions by having better insights, we will have a huge impact. And I think that's how I explain it. But at the end of the day, if you're looking at business case, we have to look at what the hard dollars we're going to get out of any investment in data.
Okay. Thank you. And Sam, when you're out there in the market, how do you see the benefits and the penalties of getting it right or wrong?
Really, this a very similar answer, but I think it's the accuracy of those decisions, but it's also the speed that you can get the decision makers the data. If they can get it earlier in the chain, that's powerful. In terms of what I was going to mention, it's really well, the benefits are revenue, cost savings, and transparency, and the penalties are reduced revenue, cost, and confusion. So I think it's as simple as that. And I would urge people to look at, and when I'm talking about cost, I'm talking about total cost of ownership. I'm not talking about cost. And I think that's the other thing that people should bear in mind.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much indeed. Let's just have a quick look at the poll results. We won't comment on these, just for some business benefits. Yep, you covered those, and some operational benefits. So yeah, good place to be, good place to start. Thank you very much indeed. And coming to our final item today, I'd like to ask all our speakers to provide a little bit of advice for practitioners who are working on buy-side data management and looking at structured and unstructured data. John, would you like to start here?
Sure. I would, when you're looking at and evaluating, you also don't want to get into a science experiment, as Gurpreet had mentioned in the past, in our conversation. I want to start with the highest impact use case, which means a defined business problem and a business use case. It really has to be really well defined in order to find success in picking the right solution. We found this to be two things. Number one, where you're dealing with high complexity and high volume, right? These are effectively translates to good ROI saving. So on the high complexity, high volume problem, when you're dealing with unstructured documents, you could have a high complexity, high volume problem. Recently, one of the things that we've seen is loan notices, as an example. That's a high complexity, high volume problem in which you're throwing human resources to extract data out of a loan notice. So that's one. Invest in AI and automation early. When is early enough? I think we need to invest in AI and automation early because the ROI compounds over time. And think about governance from the beginning, right? In addition to data strategy, part of the data strategy should be the governance. It can no longer be an afterthought because I've seen too many firms think about governance after they've implemented something, and that's a recipe for disaster.
Okay, thank you. Christina, a few quick points from you, please.
Yeah, I think John touches already is a very important point, so it's hard to add, but maybe give some other flavors in there. So as I managed at the beginning, be clear of your goals and what you achieve and how you want to achieve it. So the strategy, really making sure what is the direction that you want to go. I find this very important. And it's then also constantly measure whether you're on the right track with your data journey, so to speak. Another aspect that I want to bring in, I find it very helpful to find the right experts and the right supporters in the company. So really seeing who can help you with certain things, who can really bring value. You need expert know-how to get this done right, and you need supporters who are willing to go the extra mile to to bring your data management solution on the next level. Ideally, of course, you have management or C-level buy-in. I think that's always helps, but for me, I find it's very important the exchange with experts and also the business units to get to really find the right solution. And the other one, I think whoever works in data management knows that this is a journey and never ends. So for taking a good iterative approach. So really saying also not only the long-term vision, but also short-term steps, and always measure if this brings the right success, and then plan the next enhancements. I think that would be my advice.
Thank you very much indeed. And Sam, a few final points from you, please.
Yeah, I think to put it succinctly, I would say find solutions that are easier to use than circumvent and easier to iterate on than rebuild.
Okay, is that it?
I said succinct. Yeah.
That's fine. No, we are very tight on time. So thank you for that. So thank you, Sam, and thank you to all of our speakers for sharing their expertise and experience. Thank you to, obviously, to Acceptor and Rhymes for sponsoring today's webinar. Before we close, just a quick reminder of some of the things I told you about at the beginning of the webinar, which A-Team Group is doing at the moment. As I said, on the 21st of November, you can join A-Team's RegTech Summit New York. You can also download the 12th version of the Regulatory Data Handbook. And in 2025, on the 20th of March, you can join us in London for Data Management Summit London. That's it for today. So thank you again to Christina, John, Sam, and Gurpreet, and thank you to everybody who's taken part in the webinar. Please complete our feedback form, as we're always keen to hear your views and improve our products. Meantime, thanks again and goodbye.